Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're tackling a concept that, well, once you really get it, it can change how you look at almost everything. Your work, your goals, you name it. We're diving into Simon Sinek's Start With Why. We've got some great material here, and we're going to try and pull out the really crucial bits.
Yeah, the actionable stuff.
Exactly. How understanding your why, your purpose, cause, belief, how that fuels inspiration and real success.
It's so true. It's easy to get, bogged down in the day-to-day, the tasks, the what we're doing.
Right. And then maybe we think about how we do it, our strategies, our unique selling points, whatever.
But Sinek's point, and I think it's a really strong one, is that the most influential leaders, the organizations that really last, they operate from somewhere deeper.
They lead with their why.
Precisely.
So think of this as a guided tour through the big ideas, but focus on what you can actually do with them. Our mission today is to get past the theory and figure out how to apply this stuff.
How to get clarity, make decisions with more confidence, maybe inspire others around you.
We've got a fair bit to cover. We'll start with that core framework he talks about, the golden circle.
Right, and why flipping how we communicate makes such a difference. Then we'll look at, inspiration versus manipulation. Big difference there.
And the biology behind it. Why the why hits us on a gut level.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Then clarity, discipline, consistency, how they tie together, how trust grows from a shared why.
How movements actually gain steam. The challenges that success itself brings up.
Which is a big one. And where our own why even comes from. It's often not what you think.
And finally, this idea of competing against yourself.
Yeah.
Which I find really interesting.
Me too. So yeah, ready to jump in.
Absolutely. Let's start with that foundation, the golden circle. Can you paint a picture of that for us?
Sure. Imagine like 3 concentric circles, a target. On the outside, You've got the what. That's simply what you do. The product you sell, the service you offer.
Okay, simple enough.
Then the next layer in is the how. This is how you do what you do. Your unique processes, your proprietary technology, your company culture, maybe, the things that differentiate you.
Right, your secret sauce.
Kind of. And then right in the center, the bullseye, that's the why. Your purpose, your cause, your belief. Why does your organization exist? Why do you get out of bed in the morning?
And the crucial insight Sinek offers is about the direction of communication, right?
Exactly. Most of us and most companies communicate from the outside in. We say, here's what we do.
We make great computers.
They have these features. That's the what. Then maybe, here's how we're different. The how.
And the why.
Often it's just missing, or it's fuzzy, an afterthought. But inspiring leaders, inspiring brands, they do the opposite, inside out.
They start with why.
They start with why, then they talk about how they fulfill that why. And the what they do simply serves as the tangible proof of that core belief.
Apple's the go-to example he uses, isn't it?
It really is. Think about their marketing. It's rarely just about speeds and feeds, the how. And it's definitely not just we sell computers, the what.
No, it's about challenging the status quo. Thinking differently, empowering creativity. That's the why.
Right. And Sinek's famous line captures it perfectly. People don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. The iPhone, the Mac, they become symbols of that belief.
Whereas a generic competitor might just list features and benefits.
Exactly. Our laptop has X gigabytes of RAM, Y processor speed. That's all what and how. It might appeal rationally, but it doesn't really connect. It doesn't inspire loyalty in the same way.
So let's dig into that. Why is starting with why so much more effective? Sinek brings up the Wright brothers, Apple again, MLK. What connects them?
Well, the core idea is inspiration. They didn't just motivate people with, say, carrots and sticks.
Like discounts or fear tactics?
Exactly. Think about car dealerships constantly running sales events. Or, the old saying, nobody ever got fired for hiring IBM. That's playing on fear. Sinek labels that kind of thing manipulation.
Okay, manipulation versus inspiration. And he draws a line between just getting repeat business and earning real loyalty. What's that distinction?
Yeah, it's crucial. Repeat business is transactional. Someone buys from you again, maybe because it's convenient or cheap or just habit.
Okay.
Loyalty, though. Loyalty is deeper. He defines it as loyalty is when people are willing to turn down a better product or a better price to continue doing business with you.
Wow, so they're not even shopping around sometimes.
Often, no. Because they feel a connection, they believe what you believe. It's an emotional bond, not just a rational calculation.
So things like price drops, limited time offers, playing on peer pressure, even just novelty. Those are manipulative tactics.
According to Sinek, yes, they can work in the short term, absolutely. They get a click, a sale. But they're costly to maintain, and they don't build that deep, lasting
We
relationship.
don't build trust.
Exactly. Inspiration, which comes from a clearly communicated why, fosters that trust and genuine loyalty. It's about shared values.
And this isn't just psychological fluff, right? The book talks about the biology involved. How does the why actually connect with our brains?
Yeah, this part is really interesting. Sinek links the golden circle to the structure of the human brain. The why corresponds to the limbic system.
Which is responsible for?
Feelings, trust, loyalty, behavior, all decision-making, essentially. But crucially, the limbic brain has no capacity for language.
Ah, so that's where gut feelings come from. That sense of this feels right or this feels wrong, even if you can't immediately explain it.
Precisely. Your limbic brain is making a judgment, feeling a connection or a disconnect based on the perceived why.
And the what and how.
Those align more with the neocortex, that's the outer layer, responsible for rational thought, analytical thinking, and language.
So we could easily talk about the features of a product, the what, or the steps in a process, the how, because our language center is in the neocortex.
Right. But it's much harder to put words to the feelings generated by the limbic brain, the why. So what do? We often rationalize our gut decisions after the fact, using the tangible what and how factors as justification.
Which makes it seem like those tangible factors were the primary drivers, even if the real decision came from that deeper limbic level.
Exactly. It explains why trying to persuade someone purely with facts and figures often fails if their gut, their limbic brain, isn't feeling it. That sense of unease when something just doesn't feel right, that's your limbic brain waving a flag.
Okay, understanding the why is powerful. How do we translate that into action? The book stresses clarity, discipline, and consistency. Let's break those down.
Sure. They're like the three legs of the stool for living your why. First, clarity. You have to be crystal clear about what your why actually is, not vague, able to articulate it simply.
So really doing the work to define your purpose or belief.
Absolutely. Then, discipline. This is about the how. You need the discipline to consistently act in ways that are true to your why. Your methods, your processes, your values, and action, they all have to align.
It's not enough just to know the why, you have to live it through your actions.
Exactly. And finally, consistency. This relates to the what. Everything you do, everything you produce, your products, your services, your communication, must consistently reflect and reinforce your why. People need to see it.
If there's a mismatch, it undermines the whole thing.
Totally. Authenticity is key. Sinek uses a dating analogy, which I think works well.
Oh, yeah.
Leading with your what's, I have a great job, I look good, I have a nice car, might get you a first date. But if there's no clear sense of why underneath your values, what you stand for, it's hard to build a real lasting connection.
It remains superficial.
Right. The what's and how's in business, the features and benefits, they serve as proof of your why. But the why has to come first to build that deeper relationship.
And having that clarity of why gives you more conviction in your own decisions, too.
Right. Definitely. It provides the emotional context. It moves you from just thinking something is the right decision based on data to knowing it's the right decision because it aligns with your core purpose. Much more powerful.
And when you operate like that and communicate that why, what happens in terms of building relationships or teams or even movements?
Trust emerges. That's the key outcome. When you articulate your why, you attract people who believe what you believe. Shared values create trust.
And trust is fundamental for cooperation.
Absolutely fundamental. Sinek argues our success as a species isn't because we're the strongest, but because we form cultures. And cultures are built on shared beliefs and trust a collective why.
He uses that amazing Shackleton ad example. Men wanted for hazardous journey.
Right. Small wages, bitter cold, long months of complete darkness, constant danger, safe return doubtful, honor and recognition in case of success.
Yeah, not exactly selling the purse.
Not at all.
Yeah.
But it perfectly filtered for people whose why aligned with that kind of challenge and adventure. He attracted believers, not just job applicants.
So great companies, great leaders, they hire for belief first, skills second.
Often, yes. Or rather, they look for people who are already motivated and whose beliefs align. Then they layer on the specific skills needed. You can teach skills, but it's much harder to teach belief or attitude.
It's like the story of the two stonemasons. One says he's laying bricks. The other says he's building a cathedral.
The why. Same task, completely different sense of purpose, motivation, and probably quality of work too. That sense of contributing to something bigger fosters loyalty and engagement.
And this ties back to the Wright brothers versus Langley example, too.
Definitely. Langley had the funding, the backing, the what and how resources, but his why was largely about achieving fame and fortune.
Okay.
The Wright brothers, though, they were driven by a deep-seated belief, a passion for the possibility of flight, for how it could change the world. Their why was intrinsic and incredibly powerful.
So even with fewer resources, their why gave them the resilience to keep going through failures.
Exactly. It fueled their innovation and perseverance when Langley's team, lacking that core belief, eventually gave up.
So a strong why attracts believers and builds trust. How does that then scale up? How does an idea or a movement actually reach a tipping point?
Sinek connects this to the law of diffusion of innovations. You know, that bell curve? Innovators, early adopters, early majority, late majority, laggards.
Right.
The key isn't trying to convince everyone at once. It's about winning over the left side of that curve, the innovators and early adopters. Roughly the first 15–18% of the market.
Why them specifically?
Because these are the people who are naturally drawn to your why. They're the ones who buy into the belief, not just the product. They take a risk, they try new things because it resonates with their own identity and values.
And they are the ones who then influence the larger majority.
Exactly. The early majority are more pragmatic. They won't try something until someone else has tried it first. They need that social proof. If you can inspire those first 15–18%, the believers, they become your advocates, your evangelists, and they help pull the idea across the chasm to the mass market.
He uses TiVo as an example of getting this wrong, doesn't he?
Yeah, a classic case. Amazing technology, revolutionary product for its time. But how did they market it?
Focused on the what, right? Pause live TV, skip commercials.
All what features? They never successfully articulated a compelling why. Why should people fundamentally change their TV viewing habits? What belief were they tapping into? They didn't connect on that level.
So despite the cool tech, it never really achieved mass adoption in the way it could have.
It struggled. Compare that to, say, Martin Luther King Jr. and the Civil Rights Movement. His I Have a Dream speech is pure why.
He wasn't listing policy points.
No, he was articulating a belief, a vision of a different future based on fundamental values of equality and justice. And that why resonated incredibly powerfully.
And it drew people in who shared that belief, even if they weren't directly affected by the specific laws he was fighting against.
Absolutely. People showed up for the March on Washington, not just for Dr. King, but for themselves, for their own belief in that shared vision. As Sinek says, people followed him not because of his idea of a changed America. People followed him because their idea of a changed America. He gave voice to their why.
That's a really powerful distinction. It wasn't just his dream.
It became their dream, too. That's the power of leading with why.
But okay, so you achieve success. You build something based on a strong why. The journey isn't over, is it? Sinek warns that the biggest challenge is success.
Yeah, this is a critical point. As organizations grow, scale, become more complex, that initial clarity of why can start to get diluted. It can get fuzzy.
How did that happen?
Well, the focus can naturally drift towards the more measurable things, the what results market share profit, and the how processes efficiency. The original passion, the founding belief can fade into the background.
And then you might resort back to manipulation to keep things going.
Exactly. When the why gets blurry, organizations often default back to manipulating customers and employees through price, promotions, fear, because the inspirational core isn't driving things anymore.
He uses Walmart as an example here.
He does, suggesting that Sam Walton's original why, serving communities, making life more affordable for average people, may have gotten overshadowed over time by an intense focus on the what, low prices, and the how, aggressive cost-cutting, sometimes with negative consequences for employees or local economies.
So the challenge is keeping that why alive and central as you grow.
Absolutely. It needs to be deeply embedded in the culture, constantly communicated, used as the filter for decisions. He talks about the school bus test. If the founder got hit by a bus tomorrow, would the organization continue to make decisions guided by the original founding why? Or would it lose its way? The why has to be bigger than any one person.
That makes sense. There's also that fascinating story about Bridgecourt Financial, the collections agency.
Oh, yeah, that's a great one. A collections firm, not typically associated with a warm, fuzzy why, right?
Terrifically not.
But they refocused on a core belief. Everyone deserves to be listened to. And they started measuring their agents not just on dollars collected, but on things like compassion and listening
And
skills.
what happened?
Their results improved dramatically. By focusing on the why, treating people with respect, even in a difficult situation, they actually became more effective at the what, the collections. It shows that a genuine why can transform even unexpected areas.
It really shifted their whole approach. So this raises a fundamental question. Where does our own why come from? Do we just make it up? Choose one.
Sinek argues no, it's not an invention, it's a discovery. Your why comes from your past. It's rooted in the experiences, the patterns, the core themes that have shaped who you are over your entire life.
So it requires looking backward, not forward.
Exactly. Looking back to identify those moments, those driving forces, those core values that have consistently shown up. What were you doing when you felt most fulfilled? What themes recur? That's where your why lies.
He shares his own story about this, right? Feeling loss.
He does.
Yeah.
He talks about reaching a point where he'd achieved success by conventional measures but felt completely unfulfilled. He realized he'd lost touch with his own why.
He knew what he did and how he did it.
But he'd forgotten why he was doing it. And rediscovering that why was the key to finding his passion and direction again. It wasn't about inventing a purpose, but uncovering the one that was already there.
Like finding your internal compass again.
Exactly like that, which leads to the final kind of paradigm shift he proposes, thinking about competition differently.
The new competition. What's the idea there?
It's about shifting your focus. Instead of constantly measuring yourself against others, trying to beat the competition.
Which can be exhausting and, frankly, often negative.
Right. The idea is that your real competition is yourself. How can you be better today than you were yesterday? How can you more fully live out your why?
It becomes an internal benchmark, not an external one.
Precisely. And he tells that incredibly moving story of Ben Komen.
The high school runner with cerebral palsy.
Yeah. Who finishes every cross-country race dead last, often long after everyone else. But the amazing part is his teammates, and often runners from opposing teams, circle back to run the final stretch with him, cheering him on.
Why?
Because it's so clear he's not competing against them. He's competing against his own limitations, pushing his own boundaries. His why is purely about doing his personal best, and that's incredibly inspiring.
It taps into that quote, doesn't it? When you compete against everyone else, no one wants to help you.
But when you compete against yourself, everyone wants to help you. It changes the whole dynamic. Competing against yourself, driven by your why, invites collaboration and support rather than rivalry.
So, wrapping this all up then, the core message, loud and clear, is start with why.
Absolutely. It's not just a nice-to-have or a soft skill. Understanding and articulating your purpose, your core belief, that's the fundamental driver.
For inspiration, for loyalty, for resilience, for, well, lasting success and fulfillment in business and in life.
Totally. And the call to action for everyone listening is really to take that time for reflection. Seriously ask yourself, what is my why?
What truly drives me? What impact do I want to have? What are the beliefs that underpin my most important choices?
And once you start to get clarity on that, it becomes this incredibly useful filter. Sinek calls it the celery test.
Right. Explain that quickly.
If your why is, say, to live a healthy lifestyle, and you go to the supermarket, you're faced with tons of advice: buy donuts, buy juice, buy celery. If your why is clear, only the advice that aligns the celery feels right.
It helps you filter out the distractions and make choices that are consistent with your core belief.
Exactly. It simplifies things and ensures authenticity. You're not just buying celery because someone told you to. You're buying it because it aligns with your why.
So by focusing on your why, you move beyond trying to force things with external motivators.
All right. Beyond the manipulations.
And you tap into something much deeper. You inspire real connection, real action, both of yourself and in others who resonate with that same belief.
It's about finding your tribe, the people who believe what you believe.
So maybe a final thought to leave people with. Think about one area in your life right now, work, a relationship, a project where maybe you feel stuck or uninspired or just kind of,
Yeah, where you're just going through the motions.
How might digging into your why in that specific context change things? How could understanding your deeper purpose there unlock a new perspective or lead to more meaningful action? Something to ponder.
Definitely something to ponder. It can be a real game changer.
That's our deep dive for today. Thanks for joining us.